Monster High is a very interesting topic for me. I think with all the different generations and all the different designs for these characters, really just there's some sort of magic in this franchise, if you would call it. Like, something about this world is just so memorizing, and it just completely sucks you into every single detail in almost every single aspect of this series. As someone who loves character design, it's a rough tie between Monster High and Ever After High for some of my favorite designs throughout any doll line, or really media in general, that I've shown interest in. A rather large majority of them in Monster High really represent the idea and concept of this line of monster teenagers in high school. And there's a lot that really stick out to me. I think some of them would be Iris Klops, Betsy Claro, Viperine Gorgon, Kiyomi Haunterly, River Styx, and not to mention all 4 of the Freaky Fusion new characters like Serena and such. They were really great design-wise. You can really see the monster elements to these in these specific designs, and they really just embody the line concept to such a good degree. But I will gripe with earlier characters, the monstery elements really just aren't fully prominent for some of them. And as I could list a few of these characters, I'm going to focus on this video's topic specifically, which is Abbey Bominable. Personally, I think Abbey is one of Monster High's weaker characters. Like, despite how much she's loved, I just don't think she embodies the monster she's supposed to represent. Not only is her accent inaccurate to her character and borders cultural appropriation, but she just doesn't scream Yeti to me. Like, looking at her base doll, there isn't much going on here except for her froskin effect and the lower fangs she has. It doesn't help her case with the implication of numerous different elementals scattered throughout the world, and that she could really just come across as an ice elemental. And while it's not quite implicitly stated that there is such a thing as ice elementals as stealth, I think the concept is just there that Yetis would take that place. But with Heath and Holt both being fire elementals, Cupid is a bone elemental, which is a neat concept to me, but it's very odd, and a minor water elemental known as Tsunami in the Ghoul Friends Forever books with Rebecca, Venus, and Rochelle, there's just something about it that just, like, it just doesn't help her case at all. Like, she could have just been an ice elemental, and there wouldn't have been any change to her design, pretty much at all. And as much as I could go on about how she needs more monstery aspects, and trust me, I will later in a certain doll, that's not what we're here to talk about today. Abbey, despite being part of the core 7 ghouls from Generation 1, is not given enough credit for what she deserves. Standing at only 16 total dolls throughout the entirety of G1's run, barely acknowledged for G2's run at all, with only 2 dolls, even which did not appear in any of the movies, and so far only 4 dolls in G3, she has a total of 22 standard release dolls. And yes, she has had a few collectors, but then again, one of them is her G2 collector, which is what the speed paint of this video of, a Creep production, and a Fang Vote doll that so far does not look promising from the in-person photos that have been spreading around online. In summary, she has to be the most neglected ghoul of the main 7. For reference, Ghoulie has 28 releases across all 3 generations, which is 6 more than Abbey, and she wasn't even in G2. So for today, I'm going to be giving Abbey some credit and acknowledge her where she should be acknowledged and review almost all of her G1 releases. I say almost due to how some doll lines I'm going to eventually do together in one video, just because I think those lines deserve some acknowledgement or certain commentary in their own rights. So for Abbey, that means her Dead Tired, I Love Fashion, and her Sweet Screams doll will not be included in this video and this list. Along with that, I'm also not including her collector dolls either, just because one of them is G2, one of them's a Creep production, and the last one we don't even have much in-person evidence for me to review upon. And the in-person evidence, which has been like 1 or 2 photos that have been spreading around so far, have not been great at the time of recording this. I'm also going to be reviewing them in order of releases, just to make it easier on myself so my brain doesn't explode. So let's get started, shall we? So to start off strong, let's talk about her first ever release. I've already technically done review on this one on my TikTok in the past, but I'm going to review it again, because I think viewing her with more critical lens, I guess you could say, would be more beneficial rather than just saying, yeah, pretty good, next. In irony of that remark, I will say that my opinions haven't really changed much on her since I originally did that vid review. I still think overall she's pretty well-rounded. Like, the pattern on her dress works really well, it's reminiscent of crystals. Not to mention her colors are also very nicely dulled down, so they aren't too overwhelming for the pattern to the design. And it gives a sort of soft feel of winter to it. But within the colors does lie a simple slight complaint from me. I do think the white is way too overwhelming. There's just too much of it in this design, and it isn't quite properly balanced out with anything. Like, the only division you have really in the entire white and blue scheme is the very simple muted colors on the dress for the crystal pattern. But even then, it's not really like prominent. It sticks out to you immediately because it's the only really big splash of color on there. And they're in the center too, so that's just also going to stand out, but it's just so overtaken by all that white in her hair, in the fur cuffs, in the dress, in the shoes, in the accessory, in the leg warmers, in her hair. There's just so much white in the palette going on. It just feels so unbalanced compared to everything else. It doesn't help that Abby's primary palette itself is usually these lighter shades, and her hair is almost solid white other than those few streaks, and her skin is that soft shade of blue that has the frost effect. I do think the pink tights, the sheerness to them, and how they're not quite see-through, but they still work there. It helps balance the palette in a way, in some sort of way. And the fact the streaks are in the lowest layer of the hair so they show right next to the rest of the palette is also a huge help in balancing what she has. But even so, the colors still are way too pastel and dulled out here, and with the dullness and all the white, I just don't feel like there's enough contrast in this total design overall. I do think credit is deserved within the materials they use for her. I think the shiny tinsel in her hair and the sheer shimmery leggings and her frost skin, all the glimmer and glam, it just really works well together here. And then they add an extra layer of depth to her rather than just making her look like a basic run-of-the-mill doll. It's what adds those specific elements. She feels more wintry, and it's very easy to make that correlation between her and her ice powers. But then again, this is where her faults lie, as she doesn't feel like a Yeti. She feels like an ice elemental, and her first release portrays that ice elemental in it. And I just wish they had made her more Yeti, added something even to her base doll that would have screamed that a little more. Because yes, the fur especially helps there and the lower fangs she has, but that's pretty much it. Like, I hate bringing this up in a G1 video, but I do believe G3 Abbey takes that idea further with her design details, like the pointed ears, the fur details on her actual body mold with her wrist and her ankles. She has baby horns. That is the cutest thing I've ever seen on any sort of Abbey doll, is for her to have little baby horns. Like, seeing G3 Abbey makes me wish G1 Abbey could have had all those details in there. Overall, I really like this one. I think Skull Shores just works super well for her, and despite its simplicity and its clothing style, I think the patterns and accessories really are just what sell this here. Pattern-wise, she's not overwhelming. In fact, I think it's just the right amount. Even though her swimsuit is fully decked out in this very detailed, complex pattern, her overskirt that she has is very simple dotted design on it. And the way they use this simple design aspect to overlay onto a more aggressive pattern works really well for this doll. It makes her feel complete without bombarding you with too many details or too many effects on there. And usually, I think translucent accessories are tacky. I hate them on majority of dolls, but a lot of Abbey dolls work well with them. And I think this is one of those where it just works well. Here, it actually shows to be a design positive. I think the purple was also a good option rather than just the usual blue that they go on with later in a lot of her releases. Mainly due to how blue would take away from here rather than add to it. I think the purple overskirt helps with the translucent bits, since they're similar in shades, and it really just meshes well together. This is also an example of an Abbey doll where the bright and bold colors mesh really well together. In some of her dolls, they just don't work and just make it an eyesore to look at, and in those exact dolls, it's just irritating to just gaze upon her. I think this one works so well just because they went for a darker shade rather than just focusing on those bright colors. Like, the black really helps balance everything out here. Also, silhouette-wise, she just works. And despite how at first glance it looks very top-heavy within the silhouette, the skirt overlay and her long ponytail really just brings that in together. So the ponytail, like how the length of the hair, really helps here as well. And overall, Skull Shores may not be her best top-tier look, but I still think it's one of the best up there. Skulltimate Roller Maze is a line of dolls I think aren't awful like most people think, but overall they feel very half-baked. And no, it's not because of the neon to me. I actually like the neon aspects in this line, and I think it's a great utilization of the colors, especially given the theme of the line itself. Abbey, I feel like in her Skulltimate Roller Maze doll, kind of embodies that half-baked concept, though. On one hand, I love this doll. I think she fits the line theme well, and the colors work well here. Silhouette and accessory-wise, she also fits in with the whole theming of the line. And she has this like black fishnet shirt overlay that does a good job adding a simple element to this design. And its tattered edge really gives off that grunge vibe that they're trying to portray here. And not to mention the use of the neon green in her palette, I like it here. I genuinely like it. I think it's a very unique color on her that they've never done. And it just somehow meshes well with the other colors. Like, it's not too vibrant, but it's not too dull that it just takes away from everything. It's really the only thing bright and bold here, too. Like, everything else is in this pastel shade, so it really stands out a bit more as an accent color. I also think the helmet is really cool. I really like how it kind of looks like an igloo. It works really well for her. This is another doll that the translucent accessories just work rather than take away, especially considering the punk and grunge aspect this line is trying to portray. Like, the DIY helmet concept and the necklace really just add that level of depth to that exact concept. But on the other hand, to this design, the colors do tend to feel a bit everywhere here, and despite how they work well together, they aren't evenly balanced throughout the whole design. I feel like if the transparent blue and the soft purple and the neon green, like, they need some even distribution with these three colors in this pattern. I think the neon green especially needs some distributing, especially since it's so top heavy here. Like, the first place you notice it tends to be in the shirt area, and then you notice it a little bit on the wheels and the shoes, and then it's basically nowhere else in the design except for hair. Maybe it could have been on the knee pads, or somewhere in the bottom of the skirt. There's just a whole middle to bottom section that just feels so off without the neon green being there. I also hate how they try to use both the transparent blue and the pastel purple for the accessories. It's just another element that isn't quite balanced here. And despite how much I love the helmet, it feels singled out and the necklace is barely even noticeable by my eyes. Not to mention, it's just the top part of that design. And adding on to that note, the pastel purple is only in the bottom part of the design, and I feel like they could have swapped the knee pads and the blue shoes for the transparent blue, and it would have worked better here. Like, her dress would have been fine, and her hair with the only purple details in the doll. You don't need it everywhere and splashing it here and there. You need to balance them out so nothing feels too overwhelming, or chaotic in this case. Overall, this is just one design I'm very split on, and that kind of speaks to the whole line. I know a lot of people adore the Dot Dead Gorgeous line, but for Abbey, she just does not work well here, in my opinion. As much as I adore this concept, and I think the patterning on the dress and the shape of it all really is cute on her, I just don't think the colors work well. I'm not saying she's a bad doll. Overall, especially her silhouette, it works well here. And I think the shape of the dress is suiting, considering it's got like this faint snowflake-like shape to it. And I really like the black peppermint pattern on it. It's just very unique to her, and even today, that's the only doll we've had this sort of patterning and dress design to. Also, the ice elements work really well here. I think the snowflake-shaped earrings fit well with what was the rest of the outfit was trying to mimic with the ice shapes. And the shoes has to be one of my favorite shoes I've seen on her so far. I think they're very suiting to her. But there's some elements in here that just make me wonder why they chose Abbey to be a part of this line specifically. The coloring of the dress especially throws me off here. In concept, I like the idea of a bright pink on her. I think it could work well given the right attention to detail. But pairing the bright pink to pastels and white just makes the dress feel like a mess. I talked a bit about in her Wave 2 doll that a primary palette of soft tones and whites does not work well with her. And given her base doll is already the soft blue with white hair, whites just doesn't work here. Like, this doll has the same flaws as her Wave 2, in my opinion. I think the black detailing on the dress is a really nice touch, and it adds depth to what is otherwise a chaotic outfit. But it should have been utilized more. Like, my 5 cents here is that instead of white on the dress, it should have been black, and the peppermint detail should have been white. Like, those colors should have been switched here to balance out what she had going on. And the white fur cuff she has on her wrist just feels so out of place. Like, they really They're really nowhere else in this design, and in the end it just felt unnecessary to have them here when they weren't even used anywhere else. I like the concept of them. I think the wrist cuffs are cute, but then if you took them off, it doesn't take away from anything here. It almost looks exactly the same. Like, in the end, what was even the point of them? And it also feels so uncanny that her hair is almost pure white. There's a few small streaks of her usual colors, and the rest is just all white. Of course, the colors in her hair itself really suit the rest of the outfit, but it's a shame they didn't try to distribute those streaks more evenly, or maybe even throughout the top of the hair, just in the back where she has a high ponytail that covers it all anyways. You can't even see them. Ghoul's Rule is hands down my favorite Monster High line of all time. It's perfect for the series, and it takes the more monsterish aspects of these ghouls and adds more details that align with what monster they are. Like, Claudine has all this fur that's made to resemble a werewolf. Frankie has all the stitched patterns all over the dress to showcase her Frankenstein style. Draculaura has these awesome giant bat wings that I know everyone hates for some reason, and I think they're amazing. I think this is just hands down one of my favorites. Even Laguna's San Diego Comic-Con doll that just came out has all those aspects of a deep sea creature, and I adore the look on her. Now take the concept of a line that focuses on showcasing their biggest monster qualities, and apply that to a ghoul who barely has anything that relates to her monster type in her design. Abbey is where things get tricky in this line, and it really shows through. I mentioned earlier she doesn't really have any Yeti aspects in the first place a few times already, so the fact she's in this lineup at all really shocks me, and the fact they didn't choose Laguna in the first place for the original lineup. And even so, it just still doesn't line up with her being a Yeti, and again, leans Ice Elemental. Like, as much as I love this line, and I think the color palette on her is really solid, I just hate how she doesn't sell Yeti here. Like, that's the whole point of the line, is to show their monster side, which is hard for Abbey to do, given her lack of monster in the first place. Like, I do enjoy the balance of the palette. It has a nice ratio between the white, the blue, black, and purple, and despite the purple only being in one place in the outfit, the purple on her hair really balances out that one spot. And somehow it doesn't feel random. The black, tattered up skirt has the same highlight to it, but it really just feels like a suitable accent here. It's not anything too out of place. It fits the Halloween vibe. I actually believe the whole distressing of the outfit works cohesively here. The tattered look works well with the line theme, but then you get to the details on the clothes themselves. And for the most part, there's not really any patterns to it. They focus more so on the fabric type and try to work with that simplicity more. She has some shiny fabrics here and there that, along with some tulle, and it by all means may be simple, but it's not boring here, I think. Having a doll for Abbey that steers away from the patterns is a good change, which they have never touched back up upon, but that's for another day. Overall, she's really simple and patternless here, and then the actual slight snowflake patterning on the skirt makes me come back to the Ice Elemental topic, because that is a detail that again sells Ice Elemental rather than Yeti. And I get it, Yetis are mostly commonly associated with the snow, but the one major design aspect they're known for is their fur. And I know they give that a lot of that to her here, but half of it is translucent blue, which means the implication is that it's made of ice, as for most of her accessories, and I think this doll would have been phenomenally better had they paired it more with the fur elements rather than stick with the snowflake elements. Adding in that fur could have sold the idea of a Yeti way better than the Ice Elemental thing did. Even though this is a doll with a lot less accessories than her normal dolls have, I still say it works surprisingly well here. The pattern she has isn't too over the top, and it's very reminiscent of her Wave 2 doll, and I also like how they steered away from the layers for this doll and really just focused on a simple dress. I think it really lets the pattern stand for itself, and it doesn't overwhelm the design with too much. The shoes are my favorite part here. I think it's so refreshing to see some shoes on her that aren't this translucent material and stick to one solid color. Like, they don't do that I think this is the only doll where it has those solid color shoes. And not to mention, the shoes themselves have these like pretty pearly effects to them. And I think that's such a neat detail to have on her, like the pearlescent aspect. And honestly, they feel more like a glacier than normal. Like, it portrays that glacier element rather than just ice. And it's something new for her to have with all these solid colors. This is one, which is honestly an opinion here, I believe she could have benefited from bangs. Like, it's hard to explain, but the upper half just feels barren here. I know Music Festival and her classroom doll have some bangs, so this was probably just before they thought of that. But I still believe she would have looked a lot more full design-wise, even with like a slight side-swept effect. Like, that slightly empty feeling in some of the design is maybe just missing an element or two. The belt, though, strikes me as being weird. Like, why have this random ice like blue on there again? Why is this here? At this point, it's the same detail as any other doll, and if you're going to up the quality on her shoes and steer away from the blue in those, why not do it to the belt too, and along with the necklace and the purse? And if that was the case where they just wanted, that's what they wanted more, then why didn't they make the shoes the same color? Like, to me, I feel like if the belt was the same pearly white, the necklace and the purse can stay the blue color, it would have split up the patterning on her dress better. I think the translucent blue does not do a very good job splitting up the patterning on it. The necklace also would have benefited from being the same color, but that's a maybe. It really, I think the belt needs it the most here. It just doesn't make sense to me why you would finally take away some form of new direction for her and her accessories in one singular aspect, but not apparently to the rest of the doll. Oh boy, picture day. Oh, picture day. A usually very solid line, yet similar to Ghoul's rule, this execution of Abbey here just does not work. This is one I have a strong opinion on because there's just so much going on here. Like, every piece of clothing has a different pattern or texture to it. The fluffy jacket, the holographic black piece of fabric on the top, the watercolor-like splotches on the dress, the diamond abstract patterning on the leggings. There's just too much here and it's not fun to look at. Not to mention the unbalanced palette. Here it feels like they were just trying to mesh her entire 5-color palette together, and it just doesn't work. The only color that sticks out primarily as the major color is black, and even then, it's only because it's the only piece of fabric that's one solid color. I do love how they tried to add more black to her palette and attempted to make it a major choice in the design here. Abbey's palette always looked better in those darker tones meshed with the pastels, in my opinion. The boots are the issue about the darker palette, though, and I understand this is like a factoring of reusing a mold. I can't remember if it's one later down the line that reuses this mold, but this is not the only doll she has with those shoe molds. It's very clearly intentionally supposed to be black, but they just made it a darker gray. I think it's because they wanted to make it the translucent. But even then, it would have benefited way more if they steered away from the translucency and just made it a solid black boot. I will say I do adore her hair here. I like how it's the classic style, but as I mentioned earlier, Abbey looks great in bangs to me. I think they suit her really well. And they add this level of depth to her she doesn't quite get very often, especially with her screening. Most of her screenings are pretty similar, other than the Ghoul's Rule one as the one outlier to me, and the bangs just add more going onto her face and really drag your eye to the rest of that screening. As much as I like how the translucent accessory element is pink here rather than the usual blue or purple, I think it was a great choice. My only issue is with that, it's just underutilized. It could be another color the boots could have been, or instead of the random gray color they have on there, like, this pink is actually working really well with the design and helps it feel cohesive. I would say personally, I think the way this doll could have been improved is by making the leggings a solid black and changing the boots to the same color as the back. That way, the aggressions and the patterns would be dampened, and on top of that, changing out the shiny black part of the top could also help. I just think that this doll needs the less is more approach within the patterning and all the effects they have going on. As I just mentioned with less and more, her classroom doll really takes the cake for being that exact embodiment of what I mean. It takes my favorite design elements from every Abbey doll and mushes them together in this most beautiful way. The side-swept bangs, the mix of streaks throughout her hair, the simple pattern, the solid colored details, and the primary color being solid black. This is everything I want in an Abbey doll and then some. It's such a unique take on her and how her design should look, and the fur elements too finally feeling like they're being properly used here. It's not too much or too little. It feels like a dress I would actually see someone wear in a day-to-day. It's very simple, but it just works. Yet this simple pattern, it works against the black and the solid blue apron. Somehow it works so well. And seeing them use so much black in this design brings me great joy. Especially because it's so well done here, compared to some of her other dolls. Also, this is just one of the first times you see more details in her shoes. It's not just one solid color or the translucent. There's some details painted on there. It really brings the depth to her. The earrings too are just such a small detail that works so well with this concept. It's not just a line where they're just in a class, they're themed after a certain class. So her earrings being measuring spoons and what appears to be a blender is absolute genius. Especially because she's home ec, or whatever it is. She's literally supposed to be in the cooking class, and they made her earrings like one of the measuring spoons. It's so cute. And onto her bangs, I love them. I really like this doll, and I love Abbey in this hairstyle. And as I've mentioned, I think the bangs work really well for her here. But my only gripe is I wish the colors were different in the bangs themselves. Like the pastel purple, it's cute, but it doesn't really match the rest of the outfit. Like there's not very many other places the pastel purple is at. I feel like it should have stuck with the pink throughout the whole hair design. But other than that, this is probably my favorite Abbey doll of all time. Other than one complaint I have, I think this doll looks stunning. The pattern on the skirt mixed with the solid gradient shirt just works so well here. And the headband also works with this minimal pattern. Like you can barely tell there's a pattern on there. And despite having all these different effects, they don't clash or overwhelm you. Somehow it just works and meshes together. Also points for another Abbey and bangs. It's always a delight. And it just matches with the headband. It works well with it. My only complaint comes down to the boots and the belt. The belt is a reused mold, which for this doll I don't mind, but it feels like an excuse to have something match the boots. And I don't mind the belt, truthfully. It does bring the design further together, but the boots don't sell it for me. And the fact they were trying to match them up together, it kind of goes hand in hand. Again, more see-through colors, but at this point, the repetition of this aspect of her designs are just boring at this point. It is an original mold, and the mold itself looks really good. Speaking of the boots, I think the mold of them really is solid and showcases this like melting ice effect, which music festival, it's gonna be like an outdoor music-y vibe is what I'm getting. That's probably why the boots feel like this melting effect, and it just feels so bland in the actual mold. Like I feel like it's missing something. The purple straps really help even that out. I think those are a great addition to make these boots look more pleasing, but I think there just needs to be some sort of detail at the top of the boots. Like maybe another strap, maybe some painted on details like the classroom one had, or some maybe fur effect up there. But other than that one complaint I have about the boots, I really overall think that she's really solid. She really sells the theme of a music festival line well, despite having not a lot of elements of it, and you just get concert vibes from it. This one I was really split on adding, honestly, mainly due to the cultural appropriation of Arabian and Middle Eastern folklore. I think they could have done Gigi a lot better, but I did want to talk about this Abbey because she has some elements I just really want to talk about, primarily the gold bits, but we'll get there. To start off, I love Abbey in these darker tones, but in this design, it almost overtakes the design completely. And pairing it with gold, too, really kind of drowns out the rest of the colors. And the other golds in this line have, like, the black to them, gold, and then 1/3 dominant color in their designs. But in Abbey's design, the third color isn't even really present. It's just... I don't own this one, so I'm happy to go off photos from online, and I can't even tell what the third color is supposed to be. Purple? Blue? White? It's not pink, and that's pretty much all I could tell. The patterning also doesn't really help much here. I will admit the gold detailing on the dress is awesome. It's a pretty unique take on her, which again, kind of like Sculptum and Roller Maze, they tie in a color in her palette and then just never use it again. And I like how the gold on the skirt mimics falling snow, and we've never had Abbey in gold, and we still haven't had her in gold again. And it's my favorite part of this entire doll, and it adds a new color that's just, they've never used again. It's a very refreshing take. But all the sheer fabrics and the tools just don't mesh here. Like Frankie, Claudine, and Draculaura all have some sort of unique fabric or texturing in their outfits to make the solid colors look more appealing. But Abbey just doesn't have much other than the gold falling snow and the white gradient at the end of her skirt. Even then, she's one of the only dolls from that set of four that steer away from the solid colors and kind of go off to random gradients. I do think the gold accessories do a really good job breaking up this doll for me. Much like the other three I mentioned, the gold headband, belt, and wrist cuffs work really well here. It makes it feel more detailed, especially given how super detailed the molds themselves are. Especially the wrist cuffs, I think they're perfect and they give into the ice theme in a perfect way since they look like ice chunks instead of just like regular spikes that she usually has. For this one, I just think if they followed the direction of the other three in these fits and made the third color more obvious to the eye, it would have broken up the colors better. Even though I know with the other, like Abby's main color, like they already have taken the purple, the pink, and the blue, so it's really kind of hard to decide for a major color for her other than white. But even then, I feel like they could have stuck with solid white instead of the gradients and it would have worked better. I will say with this one, I'm very blown away and super pleased with this one. It takes her usual design elements and puts them in a very different direction. A good one at that. I think the biggest part of that is the use of blue here. The fur detailing on the outfit, which would usually be white or black, is now this deep blue. Or, well, vibrant blue. It's deep blue in the stock photos. And it's well distributed in the design at that. And alongside that is the shoe and chainsaw, which would usually be this translucent blue that's so common in all our designs, but they're now this pretty metallic color. Not only did they finally decide to use solid accessories for her rather than going for the translucent route, they added some metallic elements in there, and they just took, it's very refreshing to see on her. With that note, I feel like they should have kept the belt color. And while looking through into her, because again, I don't own a lot of these, it seems like they changed her belt to this white color instead of keeping it this blue. Honestly, I don't mind it either way, actually. I think combined with the boots and the fact the top of them have the same white to make it seem like they're lined in snow, it actually works here. I feel like either direction for the belt color would have worked. I think with that one, it's just a personal taste. Not only that, but the colors here also mesh really well together. And similar to her classroom doll, it takes black and adds a pretty standard pattern into that design. And not to mention that it's a pattern we've never had on our dolls before. And it's really just adds depth there. And the hints of pink here really mesh well. And it doesn't take you away from the rest of the design. Palette-wise, again, she just works. The almost solid white hair I complained about earlier as being uncanny in Dot Gorgeous, here in this doll it works together along with her short hair. Mixed with the other white elements, it truly just, as I keep saying, it just works here with her. I think it's not too out there and it evenly balances out the rest of the white in her palette, and it helps, unlike Dot Gorgeous's pastel focus palette, this one has a darker color and focuses on that darker color to balance things out. Like something like this is what I think Dot Gorgeous should have been. I honestly can't find any information on if this doll is a budget doll or not, but I feel like Coffin Bean is a very nice example of how to make a good doll that is a budget doll. And I will say this is one of her most perfect designs you could make a budget for. Most, if not all, of her designs rely heavily on patterns in the fabric, and with Coffin Bean, it's one very solid example of just how the right pattern can make a design feel full. Much like Scarus, it really just works well here, and of course the pattern isn't overdoing it either. The melting pattern you can just make out is just very suiting to the line, especially given the idea that she has more of a coffee or such with a whipped topping. It just mimics that melting whipped cream a bit. And pairing it with her drink just matches. And even without it, it still works and you could tell she's part of this lineup. It also has just the right amounts between the pastels and the black. And I will admit, I much prefer Abbey in this ratio of colors than her average designs. I think having the soft purples and pinks being paired to the primary black of the design really suits her. And somehow works even better than the blue along the side of the primary black. Like, the palette is purple dominant. I'm overjoyed about how it was executed here. Like, this design just makes me wish and hoped and prayed that they could have put Abbey in more purple and just taken the blue out of her outfits completely and just stuck with it being in her skin. This also seems to be a good example of how to use those translucent pieces that are almost in every one of her dolls. I feel like this is one of the best ones of those. I think it's thanks to the colors though. It's kind of like Skull Shores, where the bright purple really matches her palette without blending in too much with the rest of the design. And it just works perfectly here. I think, as I've said earlier, I'm not usually a fan of those elements, and I think in Abbey's, I'm going to be honest, some of them are just okay, but this one, it really stands out alongside Skull Shores as being a very good use of the transparent elements. I also think her ponytail adds nicely to the silhouette. There's not a lot of standout detail silhouette-wise, but I think the ponytail really adds volume there and makes her look more distinct, rather than just some standard run-of-the-mill doll. and she's an exact example of what a budget doll should be like. Sadly, where one budget doll proves to be a great example of how to budget, another one will come up and prove how not to budget. And Geek Shriek is that big example, and considering this is Abbey's final G1 doll, you can really tell where the designers just lost all of their budget. This look is just very not it. It's not even the lack of accessories. I personally don't mind the glasses, although I believe they should have been a different shape, due to how they basically take away from her whole screening. It's not bad for what it is. It could be worse, honestly, but it's not stellar either. That dress is like mind-boggling, but not in a good way. This pattern just feels so everywhere. It's one of those Abbey designs where they're just trying to cram in all 5 colors from her whole palette into one, and it just has never worked, and it still does not work here. Coffin Bean, as I've previously mentioned, is one where it has a certain color focus. You can tell it's only sticking to 2 or 3 major colors. Geek Shriek, meanwhile, can't even decide what it wants its main color to be. And I think the purple in the shoes and the glasses try to help, but then you get to the dress and it just throws the whole thing out the window. Also, her hair just gives me an ick. The shape and the cut and the length of it, it feels uncanny. This is true uncanny. And it's like they had one of the designer's kids in the room, and the kid got a hold of the prototype, chopped off the bottom of the ponytail, and then the designers just started shouting Eureka. That's what this hairstyle feels like. All in all, as Abbey's final G1 design, this marks the death of her entire character until G3, because I'm going to be honest, G2 did not pick that back up. I wish Abbey could have gotten more acknowledgement and was more utilized in G1. G2, she's basically non-existent except for what I can assume was a replacement in her character for the G2 movies, which that in of itself is a whole can of worms, and I'm not going to dive into it today. I do love how in G3 they added more monster elements to her. As I mentioned earlier, that's like a huge bonus for me. I just personally, if they had just kept her frost skin or put her frost skin in G3, that would have, and just given her the right kind of hair, not color, but the type they used to actually root the hair, I think she would have been top tier perfect doll. Although people complain about this, I really thoroughly enjoy how they changed her accent, being to where she's actually from and not from Russia. And it's never something I'm going to complain about, the way they finally fixed up their mistake and realized the cultural appropriation that kind of stems from her accent. Like, it's clear in both the monster elements and the cultural aspects of her are being properly executed now and given proper thought in this new generation, despite how she only has 4 dolls now. But still, I wish Abbey could have gotten that credit in G1, and despite my complaints about her, overall she's a really solid design. She has a lot that work well. And her frost skin is just such a unique aspect to her. I've never seen any doll with that kind of effect before, and I wish they brought it back to her for her G3 doll, as I've stated. To add salt into my wound, most of her dolls are really well designed. I think the only flaws in summary across them is the lack of cohesion in a few, and the lack of monster elements themselves to really add to her. And of course, palette issues. I think that's her primary fault, is just her palette issues. And honestly, the only ones I have big critiques for would be Dot Dead Gorgeous, Ghouls Rule, Picture Day, and Geek Shriek. And 2 of those are very early designs for a character, with the last one being right before G3's fall. Or G1's fall, sorry, excuse me. G3 is not dead yet. And that's it. That's my remarks. Thank you for listening to me yap about dolls for longer than I probably should have.